In a war that broke empires, the human princess became a legend. Trade routes hummed with activity, and messages traveled at lightspeed between planets. Yet underneath this calm, a subtle tension threaded through the stars, a tension that few noticed but that the wise could feel in their bones. It was the sense that even the strongest empires could falter, that the balance of power was fragile, like a glass sculpture hanging by a thin thread. Princess Alara stood at the observation deck of her mother's palace on the planet Urindor, staring at the glittering swirl of the nearby nebula. Her hair caught the soft light of the twin suns, and her eyes, always thoughtful, traced the motions of distant ships. Though only 17, she carried herself with a presence that made even seasoned diplomats pause. It was not arrogance or pride that set her apart. It was curiosity, intelligence, and an unwavering belief that humans could shape the future of the galaxy through understanding rather than fear. Ilara's world was not a warrior world, but it had long been underestimated by its neighbors. Other empires called humans unpredictable, reckless, or sentimental. They laughed at their small fleets and modest technology. But what they could not measure was humans' ingenuity, their ability to adapt, and most importantly, their capacity to unite. It was this combination that had always drawn Ilara's interest. She believed that, in a galaxy dominated by political games and rivalries, humans could shine, not through conquest but through connection. The observation deck's doors slid open, and her aide, a quiet young woman named Leora, entered with a tablet in hand. "Princess," she said softly, "the council from Violia has arrived early. They request an audience." Ilara turned from the nebula and gave a small nod. "Very well, Leora, prepare the meeting chamber. I want the diplomats to feel at ease, not intimidated." The council from Violia was known for its rigid formality, a people who valued rules over emotion. Their sudden early arrival was unusual, and Ilara's mind immediately went to work. Was this simply eagerness, or was there something more? She had learned over the years that timing often spoke louder than words. The meeting chamber was vast, lined with transparent panels that allowed a full view of the city below. Ships glided through the skyways like silent fish in a vast sea, and the palace gardens spread beneath in geometric perfection. Ilara took her place at the head of the council table, radiating calm confidence, while the Violian delegates entered, their expressions formal, their movements precise. "Princess Ilara," the lead delegate said, his voice even and measured. "We have observed unusual activity along the Kareth trade route. Several outposts report sudden shortages of supplies, and some minor disputes have arisen. We seek your insight on these matters." Ilara nodded, her fingers brushing over the polished surface of the table. "I have received similar reports," she replied. "It seems that the usual trading networks are strained, and communication has been slower than expected. But I suspect there is more to this than logistics alone. Tell me, have your people noticed any unusual behavior from neighboring systems?" The delegate hesitated, then nodded. "There are minor political shifts, Princess. Certain governors act without consulting the Central Council. Alliances appear to be weakening. Yet these are subtle signs, and it is difficult to determine their significance." Ilara leaned forward, her mind racing. Subtle signs were often the most dangerous. The collapse of an empire rarely began with open warfare. It started with whispers, mistrust, and small fractures that grew larger over time. "It seems we are on the brink of something," she said softly, "though I hope it will not reach catastrophe. But if it does, we must be ready to act with intelligence rather than force." The council members exchanged glances. The human's reputation for unconventional thinking was well known, and Ilara's calm clarity made them both uneasy and curious. For centuries, humans had survived and even thrived without the mightiest fleets or the strongest armies. Diplomacy, clever planning, and moral clarity were their tools, and Princess Ilara embodied them perfectly. The meeting ended with polite formalities, but as the delegates departed, Ilara turned to Leora. "The galaxy is shifting," she said, her tone quiet but determined. "We must understand where the cracks are forming before the entire structure collapses." Leora nodded. "Do you think it will come to war, Princess?" Ilara shook her head. "Not yet. There is still time to prevent it. Humans have always found solutions where others see only problems. If we act wisely, we can guide the empires toward cooperation rather than destruction." That night, as the palace slept under the gentle glow of twin moons, Alara studied ancient records, historical treaties, and reports from distant systems. Her room was filled with holographic maps, each star system represented by glowing points, threads of light connecting planets, trade routes, and alliances. She traced her fingers over the lines, imagining the flow of information, goods, and influence. The patterns were complex, but slowly she began to see a truth. The empires were more fragile than anyone admitted, not because of external threats, but because they had grown overconfident and complacent. In the quiet hours before dawn, a message arrived from a remote outpost on the edge of human space. The transmission was brief, almost a whisper. Princess Alara, unusual communications from the Andara cluster. Several star systems reporting abrupt political resignations. Could be the beginning of a larger shift. Alara's heart quickened. She had suspected the Andara cluster would be a critical point. These systems were small, easy to overlook, but strategically vital. If instability took root there, it could cascade across the galaxy like a wave. Yet the message also carried hope. The humans had allies, even in these distant systems, who were willing to communicate honestly and openly. Information, she reminded herself, was more powerful than any fleet. The following days were a blur of meetings, data analysis, and discreet communications with trusted allies. Alara reached out to scientists, economists, and scholars from various worlds, not as a ruler demanding loyalty, but as a partner seeking knowledge. Through conversation and careful observation, she began to map the vulnerabilities of each empire, the weak points that could spark conflict if left unaddressed, and the areas where cooperation could produce remarkable solutions. One afternoon, while walking through the palace gardens, she paused at a fountain and watched the water reflect the sky. Leora approached, carrying a new report. "Princess, the Virelians are not the only ones noticing these changes. Messages from the Dravari Council suggest they are considering forming an alliance with a neighboring empire, but they have not acted yet." Alara studied the water, thinking in patterns and probabilities. "If we can create a framework for cooperation," she said, "one that allows empires to see their shared interests, then even the smallest action can prevent chaos. Humans have always understood that connection is stronger than separation. If I can show the empires that perhaps the galaxy can be saved without bloodshed." Her mind was restless, turning over scenarios like a puzzle. She considered sending envoys, arranging a gathering of neutral parties, or presenting an innovative solution to the trade and communication challenges. Every option carried risk, but Alara welcomed the challenge. Humans thrived on thinking creatively where others relied on tradition. Weeks passed, and the subtle signs of instability intensified. A minor trading hub declared independence without warning, sending shockwaves through nearby systems. Rumors of political corruption and secret agreements leaked into public awareness, fueling distrust. Yet, amidst the growing uncertainty, Alara's calm determination became a beacon. Her advisors, once skeptical, now relied on her insight, noting how her strategies often prevented disputes from escalating. Then, one evening, a fleet of small diplomatic vessels arrived at Urindor's capital, bearing delegates from multiple systems. They had heard of Princess Alara's approach and requested her counsel on navigating the growing tension. It was a quiet triumph. While other empires resorted to suspicion and posturing, humans and their princess were offering guidance grounded in trust and intelligence. Standing on the observation deck once more, Alara gazed at the stars. She knew that the weeks ahead would test her abilities. The galaxy was on the edge of a transformation, one that could either lead to widespread collapse or to a new era of understanding. She felt neither fear nor doubt. Humans had faced uncertainty before, and they had always found a way. Leora joined her, carrying a fresh report of activity in the Andara cluster. "Princess," she said, "there are signs of coordinated communication between distant systems. Someone is trying to influence events, but it is unclear who." Alara smiled faintly. "Then we have our work cut out for us. The galaxy is speaking, and it is up to us to listen. Humans will not only survive this challenge, they will show others a better way forward." And so, as the twin suns set and the stars began to shine, Princess Alara prepared for the journey that would take her across systems, through diplomacy and innovation, toward a destiny that no one, not even the empires themselves, could yet imagine. The galaxy was changing, and humans, led by a young princess with vision and courage, were poised to become more than observers. They were about to become a legend. Princess Alara moved quickly through the corridors of the palace, her mind filled with plans and calculations. The news from the Andara cluster had become more urgent. Several star systems had begun to operate independently, creating their own rules for trade and governance. While no war had yet erupted, the instability was growing like a storm cloud on the horizon. Alara understood that if these small fractures spread, the largest empires might collapse like dominoes, and the consequences would touch every corner of the galaxy. Leora walked beside her, carrying a stack of reports and messages from multiple systems. "Princess," she said, "the Dravari Council has sent a formal request. They want you to mediate between two minor empires that have begun arguing over access to a trade hub. They have refused to communicate directly, fearing betrayal." Alara nodded, her face calm but determined. "Prepare a plan. We will need to bring them together without making either side feel threatened. Humans are small in comparison to these empires, but if we can show fairness and creativity, we can gain their trust." That evening, the palace's communication hall hummed with activity. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing the positions of ships, trade routes, and star systems in question. Alara studied the patterns carefully, her fingers tracing lines of connection. She had learned early that the galaxy was like a living organism. Each planet, each system affected the others. A single change could ripple outward, creating unexpected consequences. The first step, she decided, would be to invite representatives from the two minor empires to Urindor. She would host them not as a ruler commanding obedience, but as a mediator offering collaboration. It was a delicate approach, and one that required patience. The two delegations arrived in sleek silver ships that glided silently into the capital's docking bays. Their leaders were cautious, their faces set with suspicion, yet they agreed to meet under Alara's guidance. The meeting chamber was arranged differently than usual. Instead of a formal council table, there was a circular space with comfortable seating, neutral lighting, and transparent walls that overlooked the city. Alara understood that environment affected mood. A tense atmosphere could ignite old grudges, while a calm one could encourage dialogue. "Welcome," she said warmly, standing at the center of the circle. "I know there are differences between your empires, but I also know there are ways to find solutions that benefit both of you. Let us begin by listening, not debating, and seeking understanding before judgment." The leaders exchanged glances, wary but intrigued. One began speaking about the trade hub and the importance of its resources to his people. The other explained that their expansion was meant only for survival, not aggression. As each spoke, Alara guided them with questions, pointing out shared interests they had overlooked. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. Both empires depended on each other more than they realized, and cooperation would strengthen them both. By the end of the session, a preliminary agreement was reached. It was not perfect, but it was a start. The leaders shook hands, visibly relieved that they had found a path forward without resorting to threats or ultimatums. Leora watched quietly from the side, impressed by Alara's skill. "Princess, your approach is unlike anything these leaders expected." They were ready to fight with words, yet they leave with respect for each other. Alara smiled faintly. "Humans often see possibilities that others miss. Sometimes showing someone a better way is more powerful than proving them wrong." The following days were filled with more such meetings. Alara traveled to nearby systems, speaking with governors, scientists, and merchants. She learned of the small victories humans could achieve through listening, problem-solving, and trust. One system faced a shortage of medical supplies due to bureaucratic delays. Alara coordinated a plan where neighboring worlds shared resources temporarily, creating a network of aid that strengthened relationships and prevented resentment. News of her success began to spread quietly. Word reached larger empires and curiosity grew. Humans were demonstrating leadership not through fleets or weapons, but through intelligence, fairness, and innovation. Many observers doubted that such methods could hold the galaxy together, yet the results spoke for themselves. During one quiet evening, as Alara reviewed data from multiple systems, Leora approached with a new message. "Princess, there is an unusual development in the Andara cluster. A group of systems has begun sending coordinated messages, forming a council of their own. They wish to propose a shared solution to the instability. Alara's eyes lit up. This is the opportunity we need. If the smaller systems can unite under principles of fairness and communication, they can show larger empires that cooperation is possible. Prepare the envoys. We will attend their council and guide them toward a solution that can scale across the galaxy. The journey to the Andara cluster was long, but it gave Alara time to reflect on the challenges ahead. The cluster was distant, composed of small, independent worlds that had long been overlooked by the major empires. Their lack of military strength had kept them safe in obscurity, yet now their strategic position made them critical. Upon arrival, Alara and Leora were greeted by representatives from the various systems. They had formed a council, each system contributing a voice to the discussion. It was a delicate balance. Some delegates were cautious, others eager, and a few openly skeptical of human involvement. Alara addressed them calmly, focusing on shared goals rather than differences. "We are here not to command, but to listen," she said. "Your systems are connected in ways that may not be immediately obvious. Trade, communication, and resources flow between you. By understanding these connections, we can find solutions that strengthen everyone. Humans have experience in building cooperation where others see only conflict. Let us share what we have learned and work together." Her words resonated. The delegates began discussing ideas openly, revealing problems they had been reluctant to share before. Alara guided them through exercises in collaboration, showing how systems could share resources, communicate more effectively, and support each other without surrendering independence. Slowly, a sense of unity began to form. One of the most critical challenges was the unstable trade hub near the center of the cluster. Each system depended on it for essential goods, yet disputes over access threatened to halt commerce entirely. Alara proposed a fair rotation system, combined with a network of storage facilities on multiple worlds. It was an innovative solution that required trust and coordination, but it allowed each system to maintain autonomy while ensuring stability. By the end of the council meeting, the delegates had agreed to the plan. They praised Alara's guidance, not as a ruler imposing her will, but as a leader inspiring cooperation. Leora noted the transformation with admiration. "Princess, they are beginning to see humans as equals, not outsiders. Your influence is spreading faster than we anticipated." Alara allowed herself a small smile but remained focused. "This is only the beginning. The galaxy is vast, and instability exists in many places. If we can show that even small systems can unite and prosper, it will send a message to the larger empires. Humans may be underestimated, but we have strengths that others cannot ignore." The journey back to Urindor was quiet, filled with reports and reflections. Alara reviewed the progress in the Andara cluster, mapping the successes and challenges. She realized that while small victories were important, the true test would come when the major empires took notice. Could they accept guidance from humans, or would pride and suspicion block progress? News traveled quickly. Within weeks, other empires began observing the Andara cluster's new stability. Analysts noted the improvements in trade, communication, and cooperation, and many could not explain how such results had been achieved without military intervention. Rumors began circulating about the young human princess who traveled between systems, resolving disputes and guiding others toward collaboration. Some dismissed it as luck, others as a clever strategy, but all agreed that humans had achieved something remarkable. Back on Urindor, Alara continued her work. She analyzed patterns, coordinated with allies, and prepared for the challenges that would inevitably come from the larger empires. Her days were long, her mind constantly active, yet she never lost sight of her purpose. Humans could offer a new way forward, a path that did not rely on war or domination, but on intelligence, empathy, and collaboration. One evening, as she walked through the palace gardens under the glow of twin moons, Leora spoke softly. "Princess, the galaxy is beginning to change because of you. Your actions have shown that humans are capable of leadership, and many are starting to listen." Alara looked up at the stars, reflecting on the delicate balance she had helped nurture. "It is not me alone," she said. "Humans are not heroes by birth, but by choice. We see possibilities where others see problems. If we continue to guide and connect, perhaps the galaxy can avoid the collapse that seems so inevitable. But we must remain vigilant. Instability is never far away, and the larger empires will test us soon. For the first time, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. The Andara cluster had become a model of cooperation, demonstrating what humans could achieve through careful planning, dialogue, and trust. It was a sign that even in a galaxy ruled by pride and fear, wisdom and ingenuity could prevail. And as the twin moons reflected on the palace fountains, Princess Alara realized that the path ahead would not be easy, but it was one worth taking. The galaxy was watching, and humans, led by a young princess with vision and courage, were beginning to leave their mark. The legend had begun, quietly and without fanfare, but it was only the first step toward a future that no empire had yet imagined. The galaxy had begun to take notice. Small systems once ignored by the empires were now connected in ways that had never been attempted before. Trade flowed more smoothly, communication networks improved, and disputes that would have escalated into hostility were resolved through dialogue. All this was due to the quiet influence of Princess Alara and her human approach: cooperation over confrontation, innovation over tradition, and empathy over suspicion. Yet the larger empires did not welcome her methods so easily. Pride ran deep among their leaders, and many regarded humans as small and inexperienced. They had built civilizations on the strength of fleets, treaties, and dominance. Now, a young human princess was quietly demonstrating that intelligence and fairness could achieve what brute power could not. The idea unsettled them. Alara was aware of their scrutiny, but she did not hesitate. She knew the galaxy would soon face tests far greater than the minor disputes she had resolved. One morning, as she reviewed reports from the Andara cluster and the surrounding systems, Leora arrived with a new message. Princess, the Virelian and Dravari councils are expressing interest in forming a coalition of observers. They want to learn how the smaller systems maintain stability without conflict. Alara's eyes brightened. This is the moment we have been waiting for. If we can involve larger empires in a neutral, observational role, they will witness that cooperation is possible. Humans do not seek to dominate, but to demonstrate what is achievable. Prepare the communication networks. We will invite them to a neutral assembly. The announcement caused ripples across star systems. Delegates from major empires hesitated at first. They were wary of attending a human-led assembly, fearing subtle manipulation. But the evidence of the Andara cluster's success was undeniable, and curiosity eventually overcame hesitation. Slowly, ambassadors and representatives began to arrive on Urindor, drawn by the promise of solutions that might stabilize the galaxy without war. Alara understood that this assembly would require careful planning. Any misstep could reinforce their doubts or spark distrust. She redesigned the chamber for maximum transparency, creating spaces where delegates could work in small groups, share ideas freely, and witness outcomes immediately. The layout encouraged dialogue, not hierarchy, and reduced the natural tension that came from pride and suspicion. When the assembly convened, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Leaders from several empires sat across from each other, some in traditional attire representing their long histories, others in modern uniforms reflecting recent innovations. All eyes were on Princess Alara, the young human who had brought them together not as a ruler but as a guide. "Welcome," she said, her voice steady and calm. "I am grateful for your presence. Today, we are not here to debate who is stronger or to assert dominance. We are here to explore what we can achieve together. The galaxy faces challenges that no empire can solve alone. Trade, communication, and stability require collaboration. Let us learn from each other and find solutions that benefit all." There were murmurs among the delegates. Some were impressed by her clarity, others skeptical of a human leading such a discussion. But Alara did not waver. She began by presenting a demonstration from the Andara cluster. Holographic displays illustrated trade routes, communication nodes, and problem-solving methods that had stabilized the previously fragmented systems. Data showed measurable improvements, increased efficiency, reduced disputes, and happier populations. The representatives leaned forward, curious despite themselves. Questions followed. How had humans managed to coordinate systems so far apart? How were disputes resolved without military enforcement? Alara explained the methods clearly, showing that fairness, trust, and innovative communication could replace suspicion and confrontation. The delegates began to experiment. Working in small groups, they applied these human strategies to their own hypothetical scenarios. Initially, some resisted, relying on old methods and ingrained habits. But slowly, as successes emerged from cooperation, attitudes shifted. Leaders realized that even long-standing rivalries could be managed when the goal was stability rather than dominance. One particularly stubborn delegate from the northern sector refused to compromise on a trade dispute simulation. Alara observed silently, then posed a question. What do you truly need from this route? Is it control or security? Could there be a way to meet both needs without creating conflict? The delegate paused, considering. The question was simple, yet it required him to think beyond pride and tradition. After discussion, he proposed a compromise that balanced control with mutual oversight. The result was a solution far better than any he had imagined. Around the room, other delegates began to replicate the approach, discovering that cooperation could yield benefits previously thought impossible. Days passed, and the assembly achieved more than anyone had anticipated. Agreements were reached on trade standards, communication protocols, and shared resources. Representatives left with plans to implement these strategies in their own systems. The larger empires could not deny the evidence. Humans, led by Princess Alara, had shown that intelligence, collaboration, and careful leadership could achieve what fleets and armies alone never could. Alara's influence began to grow, quietly but steadily. She traveled with envoys to neighboring systems, offering guidance, solving disputes, and demonstrating that humans' methods could succeed anywhere. Each success strengthened her reputation. Stories began to circulate, not just in official reports, but among traders, scientists, and ordinary citizens, that a human princess was transforming the galaxy through wisdom rather than force. Yet with every success came new challenges. Prideful leaders, unwilling to appear subordinate to humans, began to test her strategies. They proposed situations designed to fail, hoping to expose weaknesses. Alara welcomed these tests. She knew that resilience and adaptability were human strengths, and that failure, if approached thoughtfully, could become an opportunity for learning. One test came from a coalition of minor empires that attempted to create a trade network with conflicting goals. Alara observed the early negotiations and saw that tensions could escalate if not guided carefully. Instead of dictating terms, she introduced a simple framework. Each party would outline their goals, while an independent monitoring system would track progress. Humans would offer support where needed but not impose authority. The approach worked. The systems discovered that by aligning interests instead of insisting on control, they could achieve mutual success. Their network became stronger than anyone had predicted, and the coalition praised Alara for her insight. Leora, observing quietly, whispered, "Princess, it is remarkable how humans inspire others to solve problems themselves rather than rely on us to fix everything." Alara smiled. "That is the essence of leadership. We do not need to dominate. We need to guide, demonstrate, and empower others. When people feel ownership over solutions, they value them more than any command could create." Even as progress continued, she remained aware of the larger empire's scrutiny. Some were observing from afar, cautious and curious. She knew that eventually, the galaxy's most powerful leaders would confront her influence directly. The challenge would no longer be minor disputes or small systems. It would be the pride and inertia of civilizations that had ruled for centuries. During a quiet evening on Urindor, she stood on the observation deck, staring at the stars. The twin suns had set, leaving the sky a deep indigo, dotted with distant lights. Leora approached with a message from a distant system known for its diplomatic rigidity. "Princess, the Council of Eldari Prime has requested a private audience. They wish to understand your approach to conflict resolution." Alara's heart quickened. Eldari Prime was a major empire known for tradition and strict hierarchy. If she could earn their respect, her influence would reach even further. "Prepare the route," she said. "We will travel and meet them. Humans must continue to demonstrate that intelligence, empathy, and fairness are more powerful than suspicion and pride." The journey to Eldari Prime was long, giving Alara time to prepare. She studied the empire's history, its governing structure, and previous diplomatic challenges. She anticipated their questions, doubts, and possible attempts to undermine her. Every detail mattered. In diplomacy, a single misstep could destroy credibility. When she arrived, the Eldari Council greeted her formally. The chamber was vast, adorned with symbols of centuries of power. The elders watched her closely, assessing whether a human could truly understand the complexities of interstellar governance. Alara remained composed, meeting their scrutiny with calm confidence. "We have come to learn from your experience," she began, "and to share what humans have discovered about cooperation and stability. We do not seek to replace your methods, but to offer tools that may strengthen your systems, prevent conflict, and improve prosperity." The council challenged her, presenting scenarios designed to test her strategies. She listened carefully, asked questions, and proposed solutions that were creative, practical, and inclusive. She emphasized understanding the needs of all parties, using logic and evidence to support her proposals rather than appealing to fear or tradition. Hours passed, and gradually the council's skepticism softened. They asked follow-up questions, sought advice for their own disputes, and even requested guidance for integrating humans into their advisory processes. By the end of the meeting, they had agreed to implement several of her suggestions and expressed respect for her leadership. Alara returned to Urindor with Leora, quietly proud. Humans had shown that intelligence, empathy, and strategic thinking could influence even the most powerful empires. Her work had not only stabilized minor systems, but also created ripples of cooperation that reached the galaxy's heart. As she stood once more on the observation deck, she reflected on the progress she had made. The galaxy was changing, and humans were no longer outsiders. They were leaders, innovators, and guides. She knew the journey ahead would test her further, but she also understood that human ingenuity, compassion, and vision could overcome even the greatest challenges. And so, as the stars glimmered above, Princess Alara prepared for the next stage of her journey. The galaxy had begun to recognize the power of intelligence and collaboration over force. Her legend was growing quietly, steadily, and she knew that the most important battles, the battles of trust, understanding, and unity, were still to come. The galaxy had begun to shift in ways no one had expected. Small systems, once overlooked, were now models of cooperation and efficiency. Trade flowed more smoothly, communication networks had become reliable, and disputes were resolved before they escalated into crises. Much of this progress was the quiet work of Princess Alara, the human leader whose intelligence, patience, and empathy had begun to influence even the largest empires. Yet the greatest test remained. The major empires, long accustomed to ruling through authority and pride, were beginning to take notice. They had watched as minor systems implemented human-led solutions and achieved stability. Curiosity had turned into caution, and caution into intrigue. Some leaders openly questioned humans' role, fearing that if they followed human guidance, it would diminish their own power. Others, however, were quietly impressed and began seeking counsel. Alara was aware of this scrutiny. She did not fear it. Instead, she saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate the strength of human leadership through example, not domination. One morning, she received a message from the combined councils of the Virelian, Dravari, and Eldari systems. They invited her to host a grand assembly uniting representatives from the major empires with delegates from smaller systems that had benefited from her guidance. It was a challenge. The largest empires had never come together under a neutral human leader. The assembly would either succeed spectacularly or fail publicly, but Alara felt ready. Traveling to the neutral assembly planet, she reviewed the plans with Leora. "We must ensure that all delegates feel heard, that no empire feels threatened, and that our methods demonstrate tangible results," she said. "If we succeed, we can create a model for the entire galaxy." Leora nodded. "And if we fail?" Alara smiled gently. "Humans do not define themselves by failure. Every challenge is a chance to learn, adapt, and improve. Even if we face obstacles, we will find a path forward." Upon arrival, the assembly hall was unlike any meeting space the galaxy had seen. It was circular, with transparent walls that overlooked a serene landscape of mountains, rivers, and forests. The design encouraged equality and visibility. There were no raised platforms for leaders. Every delegate could see and interact with one another. Holographic displays showed trade routes, communication networks, and the progress of previous cooperative efforts. The environment itself sent a message. This gathering was not about hierarchy, but about shared purpose. Delegates from the largest empires entered, their expressions cautious, some even skeptical. They had attended previous briefings, studied reports, and debated among themselves whether humans could truly guide such a gathering. And yet, curiosity had brought them here. They were eager to witness firsthand what human ingenuity and leadership could accomplish. Alara stood at the center of the circle, her posture calm and confident. "Welcome," she said, her voice steady and clear. "We are here not to challenge the traditions of your empires, nor to impose human methods. We are here to explore solutions that can benefit all systems, large and small. The galaxy faces challenges that no single empire can solve alone. Let us learn from each other and find ways to cooperate that strengthen everyone." The assembly began with a demonstration of the Andara cluster's achievements. Holographic maps highlighted the networks humans had helped build, resource sharing, communication channels, and coordinated trade systems. Data illustrated improvements in efficiency, reduced disputes, and increased prosperity. The evidence was undeniable. Collaboration guided by intelligence and fairness worked. Leaders watched in silence, some with admiration, others with guarded curiosity. The first discussions were tense. Centuries of tradition and pride could not be set aside instantly. But Alara encouraged dialogue in small groups, pairing representatives from rival empires with delegates from successful minor systems. She facilitated questions, encouraged listening, and guided problem-solving exercises. One exercise involved a simulated scenario where several systems faced a shortage of essential resources due to a natural phenomenon. Instead of defaulting to competition, the delegates had to coordinate distribution, transportation, and communication to ensure no system suffered. Initial attempts were chaotic, with disputes arising over priority and control. Alara intervened not by commanding, but by asking questions. "What does each system truly need to survive this challenge?" she asked. "Can we find solutions that address these needs without sacrificing anyone's security?" Slowly, the delegates began to rethink their strategies. They discovered that sharing resources and coordinating logistics resulted in better outcomes for everyone. The exercise concluded with a network plan that maximized efficiency and minimized conflict, a result that surprised even the most experienced leaders. Over several days, similar exercises reinforced the principles of collaboration, adaptability, and fairness. Delegates began to recognize the value of human-led methods. They saw that intelligence, empathy, and creative problem-solving could achieve what fleets, fortresses, and strict rules could not. Outside the assembly, news of the gathering spread quickly. Traders, scientists, and ordinary citizens across the galaxy learned that humans were guiding empires toward stability without conflict. Some were skeptical, doubting that such ideals could be applied on a large scale. Others were inspired, seeing hope for a future where disputes were solved through dialogue and cooperation rather than power and aggression. During the assembly, a particularly challenging scenario arose. Representatives from the two most powerful empires proposed conflicting visions for controlling a newly discovered star system. Each argued that their approach would best secure resources, influence, and safety. The room became tense, and murmurs spread among the delegates. Alara observed quietly before speaking. "The question is not who will control the system, but how the system can thrive and benefit all who rely on it. What is the purpose of leadership if it sacrifices stability for pride? Let us consider solutions that allow both empires to meet their needs while safeguarding the system and its inhabitants." She proposed a model of shared governance, where decisions would be made collaboratively, resources distributed fairly, and communication channels monitored by an impartial council of representatives from smaller systems. It was a bold idea, unprecedented in scale, yet grounded in logic, fairness, and mutual benefit. After careful deliberation, the delegates agreed. The shared governance model was approved, marking the first time major empires had embraced human-led cooperative principles. It was a turning point, signaling that centuries of pride and tradition could give way to reason, trust, and collaboration. Alara's influence continued to grow. She traveled with envoys to implement the agreements, observe progress, and offer guidance. Minor systems thrived under the new frameworks, and even the largest empires saw measurable benefits, improved trade efficiency, reduced disputes, and strengthened alliances. Leora often remarked on the quiet power of their work. Princess, humans are small in the galaxy, yet you have inspired the largest empires to change. It is extraordinary. Alara smiled softly. Humans are capable of extraordinary things when we act with intelligence, empathy, and patience. We do not need to dominate, we need to guide, demonstrate, and empower. That is how we create lasting change. As months passed, the galaxy slowly transformed. Formerly fractured regions became networks of cooperation. Trade routes flourished, and communication was reliable across vast distances. Even political rivals discovered that collaboration offered advantages no empire could achieve alone. Stories of Princess Alara's guidance spread, not through propaganda, but through results. She became a symbol of what humans could achieve through wisdom and courage. One evening, standing on the observation deck of Urindor, Alara gazed at the stars. The twin moons cast silver light across the gardens, and the hum of distant ships filled the air. Leora joined her, carrying messages from multiple systems reporting successes, gratitude, and requests for continued guidance. "Princess," Leora said, "the galaxy is changing because of you. Humans are no longer overlooked. They are respected, consulted, and even admired." Alara reflected silently. The journey had not been easy. Skepticism, pride, and old rivalries had tested her at every step, yet she had remained true to human values, intelligence, empathy, and collaboration. And now the results spoke for themselves. "It is not I alone," she said quietly. "Humans are not heroes because of power, but because of choice. We choose to act wisely to help others and to show what is possible. That is the strength of humanity." The galaxy's transformation was not complete. Challenges remained and future crises would arise. Yet a foundation had been laid, one built not on fear, domination, or war, but on cooperation, understanding, and vision. Humans had proven that they could guide empires, inspire unity, and solve problems that had persisted for centuries. As the stars glimmered above, Alara felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had started as a young princess observing the cracks in a fractured galaxy. Now she had become a leader whose vision and wisdom had begun to reshape civilizations. Her story, once whispered in small systems, was now told across the galaxy. The tale of a human princess who united worlds without violence, who solved disputes with intelligence, and whose courage and vision became a beacon for generations to come. And though she knew her journey was far from over, she understood one truth. Legends are not born from conquest, but from the courage to lead wisely, the patience to guide others, and the vision to see a better future. Princess Alara had become such a legend. In the following weeks, ambassadors and delegates continued to visit Urindor, seeking guidance, exchanging ideas, and learning from the human approach to cooperation. Systems previously thought too small or insignificant were now models for trade, communication, and governance. Even the largest empires began to adopt human-inspired methods, recognizing that collaboration and innovation were more powerful than control and intimidation. Alara spent her days observing, advising, and refining strategies. She knew that change required constant attention, but she also saw hope. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had a chance to thrive without the shadow of constant conflict. Humans, once underestimated, had shown that intelligence, empathy, and determination could alter the course of civilizations. And so, as she stood beneath the twin moons, looking out at the stars, Princess Alara felt the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility. The galaxy had begun to listen. It had begun to learn. And humans, through courage, wisdom, and collaboration, had begun to shine as a force for hope, unity, and progress. The legend of the human princess had been written, not in battles or victories, but in the hearts and minds of countless civilizations. And though her story had begun quietly, it would echo across the galaxy for generations, inspiring others to choose intelligence over pride, collaboration over conflict, and hope over despair. In a war that broke empires, the human princess became a legend.